Greenhouse door crashes open. Richard stands frozen, face purple with rage, as his CEO wife lies beneath their black gardener bodies still joined, caught in forbidden passion. "You whore," he spits, voice shaking. But Catherine doesn't flinch. Instead, she rises with dangerous calm. "The biggest mistake of my life was marrying you. Everything she built is about to burn. Before we dive in, comment where in the world you are watching from, and don't forget to click subscribe." The morning sun cast golden rays through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Whitmore estate, illuminating the pristine white marble floors and expensive furniture that decorated every corner of the mansion. Catherine Whitmore stood at her bedroom window, her blonde hair cascading over her shoulders as she gazed out at the sprawling gardens below. At 32, she was the picture of perfection that society expected from the wife of tech mogul Richard Whitmore. Her designer clothes hung perfectly on her slender frame, her makeup was flawless, and her smile never wavered when guests arrived. But behind closed doors, Catherine felt like she was slowly suffocating in a life that had become nothing more than a beautiful cage. Richard had left before dawn again, as he did most mornings, heading to his office downtown where he would spend the next 16 hours building his empire. Their conversations had dwindled to polite exchanges about dinner parties and charity galas. The passion that once existed between them had faded years ago, replaced by a comfortable distance that neither of them seemed willing to bridge. Catherine had tried, God knows she had tried, but Richard was always too busy, too tired, too preoccupied with the next merger or acquisition. She had become another possession in his collection, something beautiful to display but never truly touch. The doorbell rang, pulling Catherine from her melancholy thoughts. She glanced at her phone and saw a text from Richard. "New gardener starting today. His name is Elijah Stone. Make sure he has everything he needs." The message was typical of her husband, efficient and impersonal, treating their home staff like business transactions rather than human beings. Catherine sighed and made her way downstairs, her heels clicking against the marble as she descended the grand staircase. When she opened the front door, Catherine's breath caught in her throat. Elijah Stone stood on her doorstep, and he was nothing like she had expected. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and arms that strained against the fabric of his simple work shirt. His skin was a rich, deep brown that seemed to glow in the morning light, and his face was all strong angles and perfect proportions. But it was his eyes that truly stopped her, deep brown pools that seemed to see right through her carefully constructed facade. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the air between them charged with something Catherine couldn't quite name. "Good morning, ma'am," Elijah said, his voice deep and smooth like aged whiskey. "I'm here to work on the gardens." Catherine found herself staring, her mind suddenly blank of all the polite greetings she had rehearsed. "Yes, of course," she finally managed, stepping aside to let him enter. "I'm Catherine Whitmore." "You can call me Catherine, please." She watched as he stepped into her home, his presence somehow making the vast entryway feel smaller, more intimate. He carried himself with a quiet confidence that was magnetic, nothing like the arrogance she was used to from Richard's business associates. As she led Elijah through the house toward the back gardens, Catherine found herself acutely aware of him walking behind her. She could feel his eyes on her, not in a crude or disrespectful way, but with an intensity that made her skin tingle. She showed him the garden supplies, the tools, the areas that needed the most attention, all while trying to ignore the way her heart was racing. "This is ridiculous," she told herself. "He's the gardener. You're a married woman." But her body seemed to have its own ideas, responding to his presence in ways she hadn't felt in years. The days that followed fell into a pattern that Catherine both dreaded and anticipated. Each morning, Elijah would arrive, and Catherine would find excuses to be outside, bringing him water, asking questions about the plants, anything to be near him. They would talk, and Catherine discovered that beneath his quiet exterior was a man of depth and intelligence. He had studied horticulture at community college while working nights to support his younger siblings. He spoke about plants with a passion that made her envious, because it had been so long since she had felt passionate about anything. One particularly warm afternoon, Catherine brought Elijah a glass of lemonade as he worked shirtless in the rose garden. His body was magnificent, all muscle and sinew glistening with sweat in the afternoon sun. She tried not to stare, but it was impossible not to notice the way his muscles moved as he worked, the defined planes of his chest and stomach, the power in his arms. "Thank you, ma'am," he said, taking the glass from her. Their fingers brushed, and Catherine felt electricity shoot through her arm. She pulled back quickly, flustered. "I've asked you to call me Catherine," she said, more sharply than she intended. Elijah smiled, a slow, knowing smile that made her stomach flip. "Catherine," he repeated, and the way he said her name made it sound like a prayer. She excused herself quickly, practically fleeing back to the house, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. That night, as Richard lay snoring beside her, Catherine couldn't sleep. She kept seeing Elijah in her mind, the way he looked at her, the way his body moved, the deep timbre of his voice. Her hand drifted down her body of its own accord, and she imagined what it would feel like to have those strong hands on her skin. She brought herself to a shuddering climax thinking about him, then lay awake feeling guilty and ashamed. But beneath the guilt was something else, something that felt dangerously like hope. The tension between Catherine and Elijah grew with each passing day. Their conversations became longer, more personal. He told her about growing up in the South, about the racism he had faced, about his dreams of one day having his own landscaping business. She found herself sharing things she had never told anyone, about feeling trapped, about the loneliness of her privileged life, about the woman she used to be before she became Mrs. Whitmore. Elijah listened without judgment, his eyes full of understanding and something deeper that Catherine was afraid to name. One afternoon, Catherine found Elijah in the greenhouse, his hands covered in soil as he carefully repotted some delicate orchids. She watched him for a moment, admiring the gentleness in his large hands. "You have such a gift," she said softly. Elijah looked up, his eyes meeting hers. "Everyone has gifts, Catherine," he replied. "Some people just forget what theirs are." The words hit her like a physical blow because he was right. She had forgotten who she was, had let herself become nothing more than Richard's perfect wife. Without thinking, Catherine stepped closer to him. "Tell me something, Elijah," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think about me?" The question hung in the air between them, dangerous and electric. Elijah set down the orchid and stood, closing the distance between them until they were barely a foot apart. She could smell him, earth and sweat and something masculine that made her head swim. "Every moment of every day," he answered honestly, his voice rough with suppressed desire. "But you're married, Catherine." "This isn't right." "I know," Catherine whispered, but she didn't step back. She couldn't. The pull between them was too strong. "I know it's not right, but I can't stop thinking about you. Can't stop imagining what it would feel like if you touched me." Elijah's jaw clenched, and she could see him fighting with himself. His hands balled into fists at his sides, as if he was physically restraining himself from reaching for her. "You don't know what you're asking for," he said, his voice strained. "Then show me," Catherine challenged, her fear melting away in the heat of the moment. "Show me what I'm asking for." Something broke in Elijah then. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb stroking her cheek with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. "You're so beautiful," he murmured. "From the first moment I saw you, I knew you were going to be my downfall." "Then let's fall together," Catherine breathed. And she closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his. The kiss was everything Catherine had been craving and more. Elijah's lips were soft but demanding, claiming her mouth with a passion that made her knees weak. His arms came around her, pulling her against his hard body, and Catherine melted into him. She could feel every ridge of muscle, could feel the heat of him seeping through her thin summer dress. Her hands explored his chest, marveling at the solid strength of him. This was nothing like kissing Richard, nothing like the perfunctory pecks they shared on special occasions. This was fire and need and desperate hunger. Elijah's hands roamed her body, careful but possessive, as if he was memorizing every curve. He cupped her face, her neck, her waist, pulling her impossibly closer. Catherine moaned into his mouth, her body responding to him in ways she had thought dead. She could feel the hard evidence of his desire pressing against her stomach, and it thrilled her in a way she had never experienced. He wanted her, truly wanted her, not just as a trophy or a possession, but as a woman. They broke apart, both breathing hard, their foreheads pressed together. "Catherine," Elijah whispered, his voice thick with desire and concern. "Are you sure about this? If we do this, there's no going back." Catherine knew he was right. She knew this could destroy everything, her marriage, her reputation, her comfortable life. But in that moment, she didn't care. For the first time in years, she felt alive, felt desired, felt like herself. "I'm sure," she said firmly, taking his hand and leading him out of the greenhouse. They made their way to the pool house, a small building at the edge of the property that was rarely used. Catherine's heart was pounding so hard she thought everyone in the neighborhood must be able to hear it. She was really doing this, really about to betray her marriage vows, really about to give herself to this man who made her feel things she had thought lost forever. Inside the pool house, they came together again, their kisses more urgent now. Elijah's hands found the zipper of her dress, slowly pulling it down as his lips traced a path along her jaw and down her neck. The dress pooled at her feet, leaving Catherine standing in only her lace bra and panties. She felt vulnerable and exposed, but the way Elijah looked at her, with such hunger and reverence, made her feel powerful too. "You're perfect," Elijah murmured, his hands skimming over her bare skin. Catherine shivered at his touch, goosebumps rising in the wake of his fingers. She reached for him, pulling his shirt over his head, revealing the magnificent body she had been dreaming about. She ran her hands over his chest, feeling the play of muscles beneath warm skin. He was all power and strength, and she had never felt so feminine, so desired, so alive. Elijah lifted her easily, carrying her to the couch against the far wall. He laid her down gently, his body covering hers, and Catherine wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him closer. She could feel him, hard and huge against her core, separated only by thin layers of fabric. She rolled her hips experimentally, and Elijah groaned, the sound vibrating through his chest into hers. "Catherine," he said, his voice strained. "I need you to be sure. Once we start, I don't think I'll be able to stop." She looked up at him. This beautiful man who was giving her a chance to back out even though she could see how much he wanted her. It made her want him even more. "I want this, Elijah," she said firmly. "I want you. Show me what it's like to be truly desired." With a growl of surrender, Elijah captured her mouth again, his kiss demanding and thorough. His hands explored her body with increasing boldness, unclasping her bra and tossing it aside. When his mouth closed over her chest, Catherine cried out, her back arching off the couch. Richard had never touched her like this, had never taken the time to explore her body, to learn what made her respond. But Elijah seemed determined to discover every sensitive spot, every place that made her gasp and moan. His hands slid down her stomach, slipping beneath the waistband of her panties. When his fingers found her center, Catherine thought she might die from the intensity of sensation. She was already wet, embarrassingly so, and Elijah groaned his approval against her skin. "So ready for me," he murmured. "I can feel how much you want this." His fingers moved expertly, finding her most sensitive spot and circling it with just the right amount of pressure. Catherine had touched herself plenty of times, especially in recent years as her marriage bed grew colder, but this was different. This was another person touching her, learning her, pleasuring her. It was intimate in a way that terrified and excited her. She rocked against his hand, chasing the pleasure he was building inside her. "Please," she gasped, though she wasn't sure what she was begging for. Elijah seemed to understand anyway. He slid one long finger inside her, and Catherine moaned at the intrusion. It had been so long since she had felt anything inside her, and even this was more than she was used to. Richard's lack of interest in sex meant they rarely made love anymore, and when they did, it was quick and perfunctory. But Elijah was taking his time, working her with his fingers while his thumbs circled her sensitive bud, building her pleasure steadily higher. When he added a second finger, Catherine gasped at the stretch. "You're so tight," Elijah murmured, his eyes dark with desire. "We need to get you ready, baby." The endearment made Catherine's heart clench. When was the last time Richard had called her anything but Catherine or occasionally darling in public? She realized with a start that she couldn't remember. Elijah continued to work her with his fingers, his mouth returning to kiss her body, and Catherine felt herself climbing towards something massive, her body tensed, her breath coming in short gasps. "That's it," Elijah encouraged. "Let go for me, Catherine. Come on my fingers." His words, combined with the pressure of his thumb and the steady thrust of his fingers, pushed her over the edge. Catherine came with a cry, her body convulsing around his fingers, waves of pleasure rolling through her. As she floated down from her high, Catherine opened her eyes to find Elijah watching her with an intensity that made her flush. "You're beautiful when you come," he said softly. "I want to see it again." Before Catherine could process that, Elijah was sliding down her body, his hands hooking into the waistband of her panties. She lifted her hips automatically, and he pulled them off, leaving her completely naked before him. Catherine felt a moment of self-consciousness. She wasn't young anymore, and while she kept herself in shape, she wasn't perfect. But the way Elijah looked at her, like she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, made all her insecurities fade away. He settled between her thighs, his shoulders spreading her wide, and Catherine realized with shock what he intended to do. Richard had never done this, had always seemed to find the idea distasteful. But Elijah was lowering his head, his breath hot against her most intimate place, and then his tongue was on her, and Catherine forgot how to breathe. He licked and sucked and explored, his tongue doing things Catherine had only read about in books. She gripped his head, her fingers tangling in his short hair, unable to do anything but feel. When he slid his fingers back inside her while his mouth worked her sensitive bud, Catherine thought she might explode. The pleasure was too much, overwhelming, and she tried to pull away, but Elijah held her hips firmly, keeping her in place. "Let me taste you, Catherine," he commanded. "Let me feel you come on my tongue." The dirty words, combined with the skillful work of his mouth and fingers, sent Catherine flying again, her second climax even more intense than the first. She lay boneless and panting as Elijah kissed his way back up her body. He kissed her deeply, and Catherine could taste herself on his lips, something that should have been shocking but was instead incredibly erotic. "I need to be inside you," Elijah said, his voice rough. "But Catherine, I'm not a small man. We need to go slow." Through her pleasure-fogged brain, Catherine processed his words. She had felt him against her, knew he was larger than Richard, but she hadn't really thought about what that meant. Elijah stood and removed his pants, and Catherine's eyes widened in shock. He was massive, easily the largest she had ever seen, and suddenly his warnings made sense. It was thick and long, and she genuinely didn't know if it would fit. "I don't think," she started to say, but Elijah cut her off with a kiss. "We'll make it fit," he promised. "I'll go slow, get you ready. I won't hurt you, Catherine. Do you trust me?" She looked into his eyes and saw nothing but sincerity and care. Despite everything, despite the fact that they were betraying her marriage vows, despite the fact that this should be wrong, she did trust him. She nodded. Elijah retrieved a condom from his wallet, and Catherine was grateful that at least one of them was thinking clearly. He rolled it on, and Catherine watched, mesmerized by the sight. He knelt between her legs again, his tip pressing against her entrance. "Last chance to back out," he said. Catherine shook her head. "I want this," she said firmly. "I want you." Elijah pushed forward slowly, and Catherine gasped at the immediate stretch. Just the head of him was inside, and already it felt like too much. "It won't fit," she breathed, panic mixing with desire. "Elijah, I don't think it's going to fit. You're too big." He paused, letting her adjust, his face strained with the effort of holding back. "Yes, it will, baby," he said with quiet confidence. "Your body was made for pleasure. We just need to go slow. You're doing so good. Just breathe through it." He pushed forward another inch, and Catherine cried out, her hands flying to his chest. "Stop, stop, it's too much," she gasped. The burning stretch was intense, her body protesting the intrusion even as it craved more. "I can't take all of it. It's not possible." Elijah stopped immediately, holding perfectly still even though she could see the strain in his jaw, feel the trembling in his arms. "Should I pull out?" he asked, concern clear in his voice despite his obvious need. "Do you want to stop completely?" "No," Catherine said quickly, surprising herself. I need a minute." "Give me a minute." She breathed deeply, willing her body to relax and accept him. Elijah waited patiently, his hand coming down to rub gentle circles on her lower belly, his thumb finding her sensitive bud and stroking gently. The pleasure helped counteract the burning stretch, and Catherine felt her body slowly adjusting to his size. "Okay," she whispered after a long moment. "More! Go deeper." He pushed forward another inch, and Catherine whimpered at the fullness. She was being stretched wider than she thought possible, her body struggling to accommodate his thickness. "It's so much," she gasped. "You're splitting me open. I don't know if I can take more." Elijah's jaw clenched, sweat beading on his forehead from the effort of holding back. "You're taking me so beautifully," he encouraged. "Look at how your body is opening for me. Just a little more, baby. Just a little more and you'll have all of me." Inch by agonizing inch, Elijah worked himself inside her. Catherine had never felt so full in her life, so stretched, so utterly claimed. Every nerve ending seemed to be firing at once, the pleasure and burning pain blending into something indescribable. She could feel every ridge and vein of him, could feel him stretching her wider with each careful thrust. Halfway in, Catherine was certain she couldn't take more. "It's too deep," she panted. "Elijah, I'm too small for you. It won't go any further." But Elijah was patient and determined. He worked her carefully, pulling back slightly before pushing deeper, each thrust claiming another fraction of an inch. His thumb never stopped circling her bud, keeping her aroused and wet, helping her body accept him. "You're not too small," he murmured. "You're perfect. Your body is stretching for me, making room for me. Feel how well we fit together." When he was 3/4 of the way inside, Catherine felt a different kind of pressure, a fullness so complete she could barely breathe. "No more," she gasped. "That's all I can take. That's as deep as you can go." Elijah looked down at where their bodies joined, at the inches of him still outside her, and shook his head. "Not yet, baby," he said. "You can take all of me. I know you can. Trust me." He shifted his angle slightly, lifting her hips, and pushed forward with steady, relentless pressure. Catherine's eyes flew wide as she felt him sink deeper, past the point she thought possible. "Oh, God," she cried out. "Oh, God, you're so deep. I feel you everywhere." The stretch was almost unbearable, her body shaking with the effort of accommodating him. And then, with one final, careful thrust, Elijah bottomed out completely, his hips flush against hers. They both froze, panting, overwhelmed by the sensation. "You did it," Elijah said, his voice rough with awe and desire. "You took every single inch of me, Catherine. All of me. Look at us." Catherine looked down to where their bodies joined, saw that he had disappeared completely inside her, and felt a surge of pride mixed with disbelief. "I did," she whispered. "I took all of you." Elijah groaned at her words. "Yes, you did, baby. Your tight body stretched around me and took every thick inch." "You're incredible. You took all of me," Elijah said, sounding amazed. "You took every inch, Catherine." She felt ridiculously proud of that accomplishment, proud that her body could accommodate him. Elijah held still, letting her adjust to his size, and Catherine marveled at the feeling of fullness. She felt connected to him in a way she had never felt connected to anyone, not even Richard in the early days of their marriage. When the burning stretch faded into pure pleasure, Catherine rolled her hips experimentally. Elijah groaned, his hands gripping her hips. "Are you ready?" he asked. Catherine nodded, and Elijah began to move. He pulled out slowly until just the tip remained inside, then pushed back in with one smooth thrust. Catherine cried out at the sensation, pleasure flooding through her. Elijah established a steady rhythm, his hips rolling in a way that hit spots inside Catherine she didn't even know existed. He wasn't rough, but he was thorough, making sure she felt every inch of him with each thrust. Catherine wrapped her legs around his waist, her heels digging into his lower back, urging him deeper. The couch creaked beneath them, but neither cared. All that mattered was the pleasure building between them, the connection they were forging with their bodies. Catherine had never been particularly vocal during sex, but with Elijah, she couldn't seem to stop the moans and gasps spilling from her lips. He made her feel things she had never felt, took her to heights she had never reached. She could feel another climax building, bigger than the first two, and she chased it desperately. Elijah seemed to sense how close she was. His hands slipped between their bodies, finding her sensitive bud and rubbing it in time with his thrusts. The combination was too much. Catherine came with a scream, her body clenching around him so tightly that Elijah groaned. He continued to move through her climax, drawing it out until Catherine was shaking and sobbing with the intensity of it. Only when she stopped convulsing did Elijah let himself go, his body going rigid as he found his own release. They lay tangled together on the couch, both breathing hard, their bodies slick with sweat. Catherine felt boneless, thoroughly pleasured in a way she had never experienced. Elijah's weight was comforting rather than crushing, and she found herself running her hands up and down his back, marveling at the feel of him. Eventually, Elijah pulled out carefully, disposing of the condom and pulling Catherine into his arms. They lay like that for long moments, neither wanting to break the spell. But reality couldn't be held at bay forever. "Catherine," Elijah finally said, his voice serious. "What are we going to do?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Catherine knew what he was really asking. This wasn't just a one-time thing, not anymore. What they had shared was too intense, too perfect, to walk away from. But she was still married, still living in a house that Richard paid for, still wearing his ring on her finger. "I don't know," Catherine admitted. "But I know I can't go back to the way things were. I can't pretend this didn't happen, that you didn't just show me what I've been missing all these years." Elijah tightened his arms around her. "I don't want you to go back either," he said. "But Catherine, this is dangerous. If your husband finds out, there will be consequences." "I know," Catherine whispered. "But right now, in this moment, I don't care. For the first time in years, I feel alive. I feel like myself. I can't give that up, Elijah. I can't give you up." They made love twice more that afternoon, each time somehow better than the last. Elijah seemed determined to learn every inch of her body, to discover exactly what made her respond. And Catherine gave herself over to the pleasure completely, letting go of all the restraints and inhibitions that had been drilled into her over the years. With Elijah, she didn't have to be the perfect society wife. She could just be Catherine, a woman with desires and needs that deserved to be fulfilled. As the sun began to set, Catherine reluctantly dressed, knowing Richard would be home soon. Elijah watched her, his eyes dark with emotions Catherine was afraid to name. "When will I see you again?" he asked. "Tomorrow," Catherine promised. "And the day after that, and the day after that." She kissed him deeply, pouring all her newly awakened passion into it. "I'm yours, Elijah, for as long as you'll have me." That night, as Catherine lay in bed next to her sleeping husband, she felt no guilt, only satisfaction. Her body was pleasantly sore in places she had forgotten could be sore. She could still feel Elijah inside her, could still taste him on her lips. And as she drifted off to sleep, she smiled, knowing that tomorrow she would feel it all again. Her life had irrevocably changed that afternoon in the pool house, and Catherine Whitmore, for the first time in years, had no regrets about the path she was choosing. She was finally taking control of her own happiness, and nothing, not her marriage, not society's expectations, not even common sense, was going to make her give up what she had found with Elijah Stone. The following weeks became a dance of stolen moments and secret touches. Catherine found herself waking with anticipation each morning, counting the hours until Elijah would arrive. She took care with her appearance in ways she hadn't bothered with in years, choosing dresses that showed off her figure, letting her blonde hair fall in soft waves around her shoulders instead of pulling it back in her usual practical ponytail. Richard noticed nothing, his eyes glazing over her as he discussed his latest business ventures over breakfast, before rushing off to his office. Catherine and Elijah had established a routine of sorts. He would work in the gardens each morning, their interactions professional when any of the other household staff might see. But as soon as they were alone, the carefully maintained distance would evaporate. Sometimes they wouldn't even make it to the pool house, coming together in the greenhouse or behind the tall hedges at the far end of the property, their need for each other too urgent to wait. One afternoon, as Catherine brought Elijah lunch, they sat together in the shade of the old oak tree. He had removed his shirt again, and Catherine couldn't help but trace the muscles of his chest with her fingers. "You're going to get me in trouble, woman," Elijah said with a smile, catching her hand and bringing it to his lips. Catherine laughed, feeling more carefree than she had in years. "Maybe I want to get you in trouble," she teased. Elijah's eyes darkened with desire, and he pulled her closer, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that promised more for later. But it wasn't just the physical connection that bound them. Catherine found herself sharing parts of herself with Elijah that she had kept hidden for years. She told him about her dreams of being an artist before she married Richard, how she had given it all up to be the perfect society wife. Elijah listened without judgment, encouraging her to pick up her brushes again. He even brought her wildflowers from the garden to paint, and Catherine felt something inside her awakening, a creative spark she thought had died long ago. Elijah shared his own dreams too, of one day owning enough land to create a healing garden, a place where people could come to find peace among growing things. He spoke with such passion about the therapeutic power of nature, and Catherine found herself falling deeper and deeper, not just into physical desire, but into something far more dangerous. She was falling in love with him, truly and completely, in a way she had never loved Richard. The realization both thrilled and terrified her. She would catch herself thinking about Elijah at the oddest moments, during charity luncheons or while hosting Richard's business dinners. She would see his smile in her mind, hear his deep voice in her memories, and have to excuse herself to catch her breath. Her body had memorized his touch, craving it constantly. The soreness from their encounters had become a delicious reminder of their passion, and Catherine found herself moving differently, more aware of her body and its newly awakened needs. One evening, Richard actually looked at her during dinner, really looked at her and said, "You seem different lately." Appye. Catherine's heart stopped for a moment, fear flooding through her. Had he noticed? Did he suspect? But then Richard smiled distantly and added, "That new spa you've been going to must be doing wonders. Keep it up. You look good." Catherine realized with a mixture of relief and sadness that her husband had attributed her glow to a spa rather than to another man's touch. He was so disconnected from her that he couldn't even imagine she might be finding satisfaction elsewhere. That night, after Richard had fallen asleep, Catherine slipped out of bed and stood at the window, looking out at the gardens bathed in moonlight. She could see the greenhouse, the pool house, all the places where she and Elijah had claimed each other. Her phone buzzed softly, and she saw a text from Elijah. "Thinking about you. Can't wait until tomorrow." Catherine smiled, her heart swelling. She typed back, "Thinking about you too. About the way you fill me, the way you make me feel alive." She hit send before she could second-guess the boldness of her words. His response came quickly. "You're going to drive me crazy, woman. I'm lying here hard as a rock just thinking about being inside you again." Catherine felt heat flood through her body, pooling between her thighs. She typed back, "Show me." Within seconds, her phone buzzed with a photo, and Catherine's breath caught. Elijah had sent her an image of himself, and seeing the evidence of his desire for her made her weak in the knees. She quickly typed back, "Tomorrow. I need you tomorrow." His response was simple but filled with promise. "I'll take care of you, baby. I always do." Catherine returned to bed, but sleep eluded her. She kept thinking about Elijah, about the way he looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world, about the way he took his time with her body, learning what made her gasp and moan. Richard had never bothered to learn her body that way. With Richard, sex had always been about his needs, quick and efficient like everything else in his life. But with Elijah, it was about mutual pleasure, about connection, about truly seeing and being seen by another person. The next morning dawned bright and clear, and Catherine could barely contain her excitement. She dressed carefully in a sundress that buttoned down the front, easy access for what she had planned. When Elijah arrived, their eyes met, and the heat between them was immediate and intense. He worked through the morning, but Catherine could see the tension in his body, knew he was thinking about her just as she was thinking about him. Finally, when the other staff had left for their lunch break, Elijah set down his tools and walked purposefully toward her. No words were necessary. Catherine took his hand and led him to the pool house, both of them nearly running with need. The moment the door closed behind them, they came together in a clash of lips and tongues and desperate hands. Elijah lifted Catherine easily, her legs wrapping around his waist as he carried her to the couch. This time there was no slow build, no careful preparation. They needed each other too urgently. Elijah's hands were everywhere, unbuttoning her dress with practiced ease, while Catherine worked at his belt with trembling fingers. Within moments, they were naked, skin to skin, and Catherine could feel his hardness pressing against her entrance. "Please," she gasped, too far gone for patience. "I need you now, Elijah." He positioned himself and tried to push inside, but without proper preparation, her body resisted. The thick head of him caught at her entrance but wouldn't slide in. "Wait," Catherine gasped, her hands flying to his shoulders. "It's not working. I'm too tight. You won't fit like this." Elijah cursed softly, his whole body shaking with the effort of holding back. "You're right," he said, his voice strained. "I'm sorry, baby. I got too eager. Let me take care of you first." But Catherine was beyond patience. "No." she said firmly. I want to feel the stretch. I want to feel you force your way inside. Just go slow. Be persist. Make my body take you. The words inflamed them both. Elijah adjusted his angle and began pushing forward with steady, relentless pressure. Catherine felt her body slowly yielding, the tight ring of muscle at her entrance stretching wider and wider. It burns, she gasped. You're so thick. I don't know if... But Elijah kept pushing, never stopping, just maintaining that steady pressure until suddenly the head popped inside. Catherine cried out at the sudden breach, her body clenching around him. Oh, God, she panted. That's just the tip and I already feel stuffed. How am I going to take the rest? Elijah held still, letting her adjust, sweat beading on his forehead. You're going to take every inch, he promised. Just like you always do. Your body knows how to stretch for me now, even when you're not prepared. He pulled back slightly and pushed deeper, claiming another 2 inches. This was different from their usual careful lovemaking. This was raw and primal, Catherine's body fighting against his size even as it craved him. Each inch was a battle, her untouched walls gripping him so tightly he could barely move forward. Breathe, baby, Elijah coached. Push out like you're trying to relax. Let me in. Catherine tried, but the stretch was intense, almost overwhelming. Halfway inside, Elijah had to stop, both of them panting. I can't, Catherine whimpered. It's too much. You're too deep already. I'm stretched so wide I can barely breathe. Just a little more, Elijah said, his voice rough with need. You're doing so good, taking me so perfectly. Just a little more and I'll be all the way inside. He reached between them, finding her sensitive bud and rubbing it firmly. The pleasure mixed with the intense stretch, and Catherine felt her body slowly surrendering. With steady, persistent pressure and well-timed touches, Elijah worked himself deeper. Catherine could feel every thick inch as he stretched her open, claimed her, made space for himself inside her body. When he finally bottomed out, both of them groaned. You took all of me, Elijah said with satisfaction. Even rushing like this, your body opened up and took every single inch. Catherine could only moan in response, overwhelmed by how completely full she felt, how thoroughly stretched and claimed. This was raw and primal, so different from their usual careful lovemaking. This was need and desperation, and the acknowledgement that what they shared had moved beyond simple physical attraction. This was two souls recognizing each other, two hearts beating as one. Catherine came first, her body clenching around him, and Elijah followed moments later, groaning her name like a prayer. They collapsed together, sweaty and satisfied, their hearts pounding in unison. In the aftermath, as they lay tangled together, Catherine knew with absolute certainty that she could never go back to her old life. Whatever consequences lay ahead, whatever price she might have to pay, it would be worth it to keep feeling this alive, this loved, this completely and utterly herself. Summer had fully bloomed across the Whitmore estate, and with it, Catherine's transformation had become undeniable. The pale, listless woman who used to drift through her days like a ghost had been replaced by someone vibrant and alive. Her skin glowed, her eyes sparkled, and there was a confidence in the way she moved that hadn't been there before. The change was so pronounced that even Richard's business associates commented on it at the charity gala they hosted. Your wife looks absolutely radiant, one elderly banker told Richard. Whatever she's doing, it's working wonders. Richard had simply nodded, pleased that his possession was looking good without bothering to wonder why. The truth was that Catherine and Elijah had fallen into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. Every day brought new stolen moments, new explorations of pleasure and intimacy. Catherine had discovered depths to her sexuality she never knew existed. Elijah was an attentive and generous lover, always making sure she found her release multiple times before seeking his own. He had learned her body so thoroughly that he could bring her to climax with just his fingers or his mouth, knowing exactly how much pressure to apply and where to touch her to make her see stars. But it wasn't just about the physical anymore. Catherine and Elijah spent hours talking, sharing their hopes and fears and dreams. She learned about his childhood in the South, about watching his mother work 3 jobs to keep a roof over their heads, about the scholarships he had earned and lost when his father got sick, and he had to drop out of college to help support the family. She shared her own story too, about growing up with wealth but without warmth, about parents who saw her as a bargaining chip for social advancement, about marrying Richard because it was expected, not because she loved him. One afternoon, as they lay tangled together in the pool house after making love, Elijah traced patterns on Catherine's bare shoulder. "Have you thought about what happens when summer ends?" he asked quietly. His question hung in the air, heavy with implications. The truth was that Catherine had been trying very hard not to think about it. Summer was their cocoon, a bubble of time where they could pretend the outside world didn't exist. But autumn would come, and with it, reality would intrude. "I don't want to think about it," Catherine admitted, curling closer to him. "Can't we just have this moment?" Elijah kissed the top of her head, but his next words were serious. "Catherine, I love you. You know that, right?" The declaration made Catherine's heart soar and break simultaneously. She loved him too, desperately and completely, but love didn't solve their problems. "I love you too," she whispered. "But Elijah, I'm married. I have obligations, responsibilities." "I know," he said, and she could hear the pain in his voice. "But baby, you're not happy in that life. You light up when you're with me, and then I watch you dim when you have to go back to being Mrs. Whitmore. It's killing me to see you sacrifice yourself on the altar of other people's expectations." Catherine pulled away slightly to look at him. His dark eyes were full of love and concern, and she realized he was right. Every time she had to slip back into her role as Richard's wife, she felt like she was putting on a costume that no longer fit. But leaving would mean losing everything: her home, her social standing, the comfortable life she had always known. And it would mean facing Richard's wrath, and he could be vindictive when crossed. "I'm scared," she admitted, "of what people will say, of what Richard might do, of losing everything." Elijah cupped her face in his large hands. "You won't lose everything, Catherine. You'll lose things that were never really yours to begin with. But you'll gain yourself. And you'll have me, if you want me." The temptation was overwhelming. To leave behind the gilded cage and build a real life with Elijah, one based on genuine love and passion rather than social convenience. But the years of conditioning were hard to shake. "What if we're just caught up in the excitement of the affair?" Catherine asked, voicing her deepest fear. "What if the magic fades when reality sets in?" Elijah smiled, that slow, confident smile that never failed to make her stomach flip. "Then we'll work on it, like real couples do. We'll fight and make up and build something real together. That's what love is, Catherine. Not the performance you've been putting on for years." His words resonated deep in her soul because he was right. Her marriage to Richard was a performance, had been from the very beginning. They had never truly known each other, had never built the kind of intimacy and trust that she shared with Elijah. But making the decision to leave was terrifying, like standing at the edge of a cliff preparing to jump. Before Catherine could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "Emergency board meeting. Won't be home until late. Don't wait up." It was so typical of him, prioritizing work over everything else, not even bothering to ask how her day was going. Catherine made a decision in that moment. "Elijah," she said firmly, "come to dinner tonight. To the house, I mean. Let me cook for you. Let us have one evening where we don't have to hide." Elijah looked concerned. "Are you sure that's wise? Your husband might come home early." "He won't," Catherine said with certainty. "He never does when he says he'll be late. Please. I want to do something normal with you, something that feels like we're a real couple." Elijah searched her face, then nodded. "Okay," he agreed. "But if anything feels wrong, I'm leaving. I won't put you in danger." That evening felt surreal. Catherine cooked dinner, something simple but delicious, while Elijah set the table in her formal dining room. It felt both rebellious and absolutely right to have him in her home this way. Not as the help but as an equal, as the man she loved. They ate and talked and laughed, and for a few hours Catherine could pretend this was her real life, that she came home to this every day instead of to cold silence and empty rooms. After dinner, Elijah pulled her into his arms in the middle of her pristine living room. They swayed together to music only they could hear, and Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. This was what she wanted, this simple domestic happiness with someone who truly saw her and loved her. Why was that so much to ask for? Elijah must have sensed her emotional turmoil because he tilted her face up to his. "Whatever you decide, Catherine, I'll support you," he said softly. If you choose to stay in your marriage, I'll walk away even though it will destroy me. And if you choose to leave, I'll be right here, ready to build a life with you. You're not trapped, baby. You have a choice." The word choice echoed in Catherine's mind long after Elijah had left, after she had cleaned up all evidence of their dinner, after she had retreated to her lonely bed. She had a choice. For so long, she had felt like a leaf carried along by a current, unable to control her direction. But Elijah was right. She could choose. The question was, did she have the courage to choose her own happiness over security and social acceptance? The answer came sooner than Catherine expected. A few days later, she was in the greenhouse with Elijah, their clothes scattered around them, his body moving inside hers with that perfect rhythm they had perfected over the summer. She was close to her climax, her body tightening around him, when suddenly the greenhouse door opened. Catherine's eyes flew open to see Richard standing there, his face purple with rage, his body rigid with fury. Both Catherine and Elijah froze, the moment stretching into horrible infinity. Then Richard exploded. "You whore!" He spat at Catherine, his voice shaking with anger. "In my house, with the help, how dare you?" Elijah pulled out of Catherine quickly, moving to shield her body with his own as he reached for his clothes. "Sir," he started, but Richard cut him off. "Don't you dare speak to me," Richard snarled. "You're fired, obviously, and I'll make sure you never work in this town again." Then he turned his furious gaze on Catherine. "And you," he said coldly. "You've just made the biggest mistake of your life." Catherine felt something snap inside her at those words. She stood, wrapping herself in Elijah's discarded shirt, and faced her husband with a calm she didn't know she possessed. "No, Richard," she said quietly. "The biggest mistake of my life was marrying you. Spending 10 years in a cold, loveless marriage where I was nothing more than a trophy you could show off." Richard's face went even redder. "How dare you," he spluttered. "I gave you everything, this house, the clothes on your back, your entire lifestyle. You gave me things," Catherine agreed, "but you never gave me yourself. You never loved me, Richard. I don't think you're even capable of it, and I'm done pretending that things are enough to make up for the absence of real emotion. You ungrateful bitch," Richard said through gritted teeth. "You'll regret this. I'll divorce you and make sure you don't get a penny. You'll be nothing, no one. I'll destroy your reputation so thoroughly that you won't be able to show your face in society again." Catherine smiled, and it was fierce and free. "Do your worst, Richard. I don't care anymore. Your money, your social standing, your approval, none of it matters because it never made me happy. But this man," she said, gesturing to Elijah, "he makes me happy. He sees me, really sees me, and loves me anyway. That's worth more than all your millions." Richard looked between them, his expression a mixture of disbelief and rage. He opened his mouth to say something else, but Catherine cut him off. "I want a divorce," she said firmly. "I'll move out today. You can keep the house, the cars, everything. I don't want any of it. I just want my freedom." Richard laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "You think he'll want you when you have nothing?" he sneered, gesturing at Elijah. "Men like him are only interested in women like you for what they can get. Once the novelty wears off, he'll move on to someone younger, prettier, easier." The words were meant to hurt, to make Catherine doubt, but instead, they just made her angry. "You're wrong," she said coldly. "Elijah has seen me at my worst, seen me scared and broken and lost, and he stayed. He helped me find myself again. That's real love, Richard, something you've never understood." She turned to Elijah, who had been standing silently through the entire exchange. "I'm choosing you," she said. "If you'll still have me now that I come with nothing but myself." Elijah's face broke into a huge smile. "Catherine," he said, pulling her into his arms despite Richard's presence, "I never wanted your money or your status. I just wanted you, all of you exactly as you are. Of course I'll have you." Catherine kissed him, pouring all her love and relief and joy into it. When they finally broke apart, Richard was still standing there, his face a mask of cold fury. "You'll both pay for this," he promised. "Catherine, you'll be a social pariah. And you," he said to Elijah, "I'll ruin you professionally. Good luck finding work after I'm done spreading the word about what you did." Elijah met Richard's glare steadily. "Do what you have to do, sir," he said calmly. But know this, I love your wife, truly love her, and I'll spend the rest of my life making sure she's happy and cherished, the way she always should have been." That seemed to be the final straw for Richard. He turned and stormed out of the greenhouse, and Catherine could hear him shouting orders to his staff, probably telling them to pack her things. Catherine turned to Elijah, suddenly aware of the magnitude of what she had just done. She had walked away from everything, her entire life, on faith that what she shared with Elijah was real and lasting. For a moment, panic threatened to overwhelm her. Elijah seemed to sense her turmoil because he pulled her close, his arms warm and solid around her. "Hey," he said softly, "we're going to be okay. It won't be easy, and yeah, things are going to be tight for a while. My apartment is small, nothing like what you're used to. But Catherine, I promise I'll take care of you. We'll build something real together, something that's ours." Catherine looked up at him, at this man who had awakened her body and soul, who had shown her what it meant to be truly loved, and she felt certainty wash over her. "I don't need a mansion, Elijah," she said. "I just need you." The smile he gave her was brilliant, and when he kissed her, Catherine felt like she was finally, truly home. They dressed quickly and gathered what few personal items Catherine wanted to take. As they walked out of the estate together, Catherine didn't look back. That life was over, and while the future was uncertain, it was hers to shape. For the first time in a decade, she was choosing her own path, walking toward her own happiness, rather than following a script written by others. The next few months were challenging in ways Catherine had never experienced. She moved into Elijah's small apartment, a one-bedroom place that was roughly the size of her former closet. The divorce proceedings were ugly, with Richard making good on his promise to make things difficult. He froze their joint accounts, dragged out negotiations, and made sure everyone in their social circle knew about her affair. Catherine found herself cut off from the friends she thought she had, women who had smiled to her face, but who now wouldn't return her calls. But for every door that closed, a new one opened. Catherine got a job at a local art gallery, returning to the world of art she had abandoned when she married Richard. The pay was modest, barely enough to contribute to expenses, but she loved the work. Elijah's landscaping business began to grow as word spread about his talent and dedication. They struggled financially, living paycheck to paycheck, but they were happy in a way Catherine had never been in her mansion. The physical intimacy between them only deepened. In their small apartment, they learned new ways to come together. Quick encounters in the shower before work, slow, sensual lovemaking on lazy Sunday mornings, passionate reunions after long workdays. Catherine's body had fully adapted to Elijah's size, craving the stretch and fullness only he could provide. She loved the way he could still make her feel fragile and powerful all at once, the way he looked at her like she was the most beautiful thing in the world even when she was tired and makeup-free in old sweats. 6 months after leaving Richard, Catherine's divorce was finalized. She received a small settlement, nothing compared to what she might have gotten if she'd fought harder, but enough to give her some security. The day the papers were signed, Elijah took her to the park where they sometimes walked together. They sat on a bench overlooking a small pond, and Catherine felt lighter than she had in years. "I'm free," she said wonderingly. "Actually, truly free." Elijah squeezed her hand and then did something that took her completely by surprise. He slid off the bench and onto one knee. "Catherine," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket, "these past months with you have been the happiest of my life. You've shown me what it means to be brave, to choose love over security, to build something real rather than settling for the appearance of happiness. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, building our dreams together, growing old together, loving each other through all the challenges that come our way. Will you marry me?" Catherine looked at the ring he was holding, a modest diamond that probably represented a significant chunk of his savings, and felt tears stream down her face. It was nothing like the ostentatious engagement ring Richard had given her, a gaudy display of wealth designed to impress others. This ring was chosen with love, offered with genuine emotion, and it was more precious to Catherine than all the diamonds in the world. "Yes," she said through her tears. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Elijah slipped the ring on her finger and pulled her into his arms, kissing her as the late autumn sun painted the sky in shades of gold and amber. People in the park clapped and cheered, and Catherine laughed with pure joy. She had traded a mansion for a small apartment, designer clothes for thrift store finds, social prestige for authenticity. And she had never been happier. Their wedding took place on a mild day in December at the small community church Elijah attended. There was no elaborate guest list, no expensive decorations, no designer gown. Catherine wore a simple white dress from a local boutique, carried wildflowers that Elijah had grown himself, and stood before a small gathering of people who truly cared about them. Elijah's family was there, warm and welcoming, embracing Catherine despite the scandal of her past. Her own family had disowned her, unable to forgive the embarrassment she had brought upon them, but Catherine found she didn't miss them. These people, Elijah's people, loved her for who she was, rather than what she represented. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Elijah kissed her with such tenderness and passion that Catherine felt her heart might burst. They were married, truly married, bound not by social obligation or convenience, but by genuine love and respect and partnership. The reception was held in the church basement, with potluck dishes and homemade decorations, and it was perfect. Catherine danced with her new husband, laughing as he spun her around the small dance floor, feeling more cherished and valued than she ever had at any society gala. That night, in the bedroom of their small apartment, Elijah made love to his wife with reverence and passion. He took his time, exploring her body as if it was the first time, bringing her to climax twice with his mouth and fingers, before finally sinking into her welcoming heat. Catherine wrapped her legs around him, pulling him deeper, marveling as always at the perfect way he filled her. "I love you," she gasped as he moved within her. "I love you so much, Elijah." His response was to capture her mouth in a searing kiss, to increase his pace, to reach between their bodies and stroke her sensitive nub until she was crying out his name, her body clenching around him as pleasure overwhelmed her. He followed her over the edge moments later, groaning her name, and they collapsed together in a tangle of sweaty limbs and racing hearts. As they lay in the afterglow, Elijah's hand came to rest on Catherine's still flat stomach. "One day," he said softly, "we'll fill this apartment with the sound of children's laughter. We'll build a family based on love and respect and genuine connection." Catherine placed her hand over his, imagining a future filled with tiny feet running across their floors, with bedtime stories and scraped knees and school plays. "Yes," she agreed. "We will, and we'll teach them to value authenticity over appearance, love over money, courage over conformity." The months turned into years, and Catherine and Elijah built a life that was rich in all the ways that mattered. Elijah's business continued to grow, eventually becoming successful enough that they could afford a small house with a yard. Catherine's career in the art world flourished, and she even started painting again, creating pieces that reflected her journey from captivity to freedom. They faced challenges, financial struggles, and health scares, the everyday difficulties that all couples navigate. But they faced them together, their love growing stronger rather than fading with time. Richard remarried within 2 years, choosing another young, beautiful woman who would look good on his arm and make no demands on his heart. Catherine occasionally saw photos of them in society pages and felt nothing but pity. She knew that life, knew the emptiness that lurked behind the beautiful facades, and she was grateful every day that she had escaped it. 5 years after their wedding, Catherine discovered she was pregnant. She told Elijah one evening as they sat in their small backyard, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. He gathered her into his arms, tears streaming down his face, and kissed her with such joy and tenderness that Catherine fell in love with him all over again. "They're going to be so loved," he promised. "So cherished and valued for exactly who they are." Catherine rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and knew he was right. Their daughter was born on a crisp spring morning, with Elijah holding Catherine's hand through every contraction, coaching her through the pain, celebrating each small victory. When they placed the tiny, perfect baby in Catherine's arms, she wept with joy. This was her family, her real family, built on love and sacrifice and the courage to choose authenticity over appearance. They named her Hope, because that's what Catherine had found when Elijah walked into her life. Hope for something better, hope for genuine love, hope for a future filled with meaning rather than empty status. As Catherine sat in her hospital bed, watching Elijah cradle their daughter with such gentleness and awe, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had given up a mansion for a small house, designer clothes for practical ones, social prestige for authenticity. She had walked away from wealth and security and everything she had been raised to value. And in return, She had gained everything that truly mattered: love, partnership, passion, purpose, and now a family built on a foundation of genuine connection. People had judged her, called her foolish for throwing away such a comfortable life, for choosing a gardener over a CEO. But those people didn't understand that she hadn't just chosen a different man. She had chosen herself, had chosen to value her own happiness and authenticity over other people's expectations and approval. She had chosen a life that was real over one that only looked good from the outside. Years later, when people asked Catherine if she regretted her decision, if she missed the luxury and status of her former life, she would smile and shake her head. "How could I regret finding real love?" she would say. "How could I miss a life that was killing my soul?" Then she would look at Elijah, at the man who had awakened her body and soul, who had shown her what it meant to be truly loved and valued, and she would feel nothing but gratitude. He had helped her escape her gilded cage, had given her the courage to fly, and together they had built something far more precious than all the wealth in the world. They had built a life filled with love, passion, authenticity, and hope. And that, Catherine knew, was worth more than any mansion, any diamond, any social standing could ever be. The story of Catherine and Elijah was one of transformation, of courage, of choosing love over security and authenticity over appearance. It was a reminder that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from everything you know in pursuit of something real. That sometimes the greatest treasures come in the simplest packages. And that true love, the kind that sees you and accepts you and challenges you to be your best self, is worth any sacrifice, any struggle, any judgment from the outside world. Because at the end of the day, the only approval that truly matters is your own, and the only life worth living is one that's genuinely yours. 10 years had passed since that fateful day in the greenhouse, when Catherine's old life had come crashing down. Now, as she stood in the kitchen of their modest but comfortable home, she watched through the window as Elijah played with their 3 children in the backyard. Hope was 10 now, a thoughtful girl with her father's eyes and her mother's creativity. The twins, Grace and Noah, were 7, bundles of energy that kept both parents constantly on their toes. The sight of her family filled Catherine with a contentment so deep it sometimes brought tears to her eyes. The years hadn't always been easy. There had been times when money was so tight that Catherine had to choose between paying the electric bill or buying groceries. There had been whispers and judgment from people who couldn't understand why she had thrown away such a privileged life. There had been nights when she lay awake worrying about making ends meet, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. But then Elijah would pull her close, his strong arms wrapping around her, and remind her of all they had built together. And Catherine would remember that she had never been truly alive until she met him. Elijah's landscaping business had grown steadily over the years. What had started as a one-man operation working out of a pickup truck had evolved into a thriving company with 5 employees and a reputation for excellence. He specialized in creating healing gardens for hospitals and community centers, using his gift with plants to bring peace and beauty to places that needed it most. Catherine had returned to painting, and her work had gained recognition in the local art community. She taught classes at the community center, sharing her passion with others who had forgotten their own creative spark, just as she once had. Their home was nothing like the Whitmore mansion. It was a 3-bedroom craftsman on a tree-lined street, with a yard that Elijah had transformed into a masterpiece of native plants and flowering shrubs. The furniture was a mix of second-hand finds and pieces they had saved up for over time. There were fingerprints on the windows, toys scattered across the living room floor, and crayon drawings held to the refrigerator with magnets. It was chaotic and imperfect, and absolutely perfect in its imperfection. This was a home filled with love and laughter and real life, not a showplace designed to impress others. Catherine's relationship with her body had continued to evolve over the years. 3 pregnancies had changed her figure, leaving her with stretch marks and softer curves than she'd had as Richard's wife. But Elijah worshipped every inch of her, running his hands over her body with such appreciation and desire that Catherine felt more beautiful at 42 than she had at 25. Their physical connection remained intense and passionate even after a decade together. They had learned to steal moments of intimacy whenever they could, quick encounters during the children's nap time, passionate reunions after the kids were asleep, playful shower sessions on weekend mornings. One evening, after the children were finally tucked into bed, Elijah found Catherine in their bedroom looking at old photographs. She held a picture from her days as Mrs. Whitmore standing beside Richard at some charity gala, her smile perfect and empty. Elijah sat beside her, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked quietly. "The money, the status, the ease of that life?" Catherine looked at the photograph, at the woman she used to be, and felt like she was looking at a stranger. "Not for a single second," she said honestly. "That woman in the picture, she was hollow inside. She had everything except the things that actually matter." She set the photograph aside and picked up another one, this one from their wedding day. They were both laughing, her simple white dress caught by the wind, Elijah's arms wrapped around her waist. The joy in their faces was undeniable, the love between them visible in every line of their bodies. "This is what I miss when I'm not with you," Catherine said, touching the photo gently. "This feeling of being truly seen, truly loved, truly alive." Elijah pulled her closer, his lips finding the sensitive spot beneath her ear that he knew would make her shiver. "Let me remind you of that feeling right now," he murmured. Their lovemaking that night was slow and tender, a reaffirmation of all they had built together. Elijah took his time with her body, kissing every stretch mark, every curve, every imperfection that Catherine sometimes worried about. "You're more beautiful now than you were 10 years ago," he told her as he positioned himself at her entrance. "Age and motherhood and life have just made you more perfectly you. Even after a decade together, that first push inside was always intense." Catherine gasped as Elijah began to enter her body resisting despite her arousal. "You're still so tight," Elijah groaned, pushing forward slowly. "After all these years, you still grip me like it's the first time." Catherine felt the familiar stretch, the delicious burn as her body accommodated his thickness. "I don't think I'll ever get used to your size," she admitted breathlessly. "Every time feels like you're stretching me open all over again." "It's been a few days," Elijah said, pausing halfway inside. "You need time to adjust." He pulled back and pushed forward again, each careful thrust claiming another inch. Catherine's hands gripped his shoulders, her body trembling with the effort of taking him. "There," he murmured, when he was 3/4 of the way inside. "Almost there, baby. Just a little more." He shifted his angle and pushed the rest of the way in, both of them groaning as he bottomed out completely. "I forgot how deep you go," Catherine gasped, her body stretched and full. "How completely you fill me." Elijah began to move, his hips rolling in that perfect way that hit all her sensitive spots. "This is what I needed," he said, his dark eyes holding hers. "To feel you wrapped around me, to be buried so deep inside you that I don't know where I end, and you begin." As they moved together, Catherine realized that this was what true intimacy looked like. It wasn't just about physical pleasure, though that was certainly present. It was about vulnerability and trust, and two souls connecting on the deepest level, bodies joined so completely that they became one. The next morning, as Catherine prepared breakfast while Elijah got the children ready for school, she reflected on how different her life was from what she had imagined as a young woman. She had thought success meant a big house and expensive clothes and the approval of society's elite. But standing in her small kitchen, listening to her husband laugh at something one of the twins said, watching Hope concentrate on her homework at the table, Catherine understood that she had achieved something far more valuable. She had built a life based on authenticity and love and genuine connection. She had raised children who knew they were valued for who they were, not what they possessed. She had created art that came from her soul rather than trying to please others. And she had found a partner who saw her, truly saw her, and loved every part of what he saw. Later that week, Catherine received an unexpected phone call. It was from Emily, one of the women who had been part of her social circle during her marriage to Richard. Emily's voice was hesitant as she asked if they could meet for coffee. Catherine agreed, curious about what this could be about. When they met at a small cafe, Emily looked different from Catherine's memories. She was thinner, with lines of stress around her eyes, and her perfectly styled hair couldn't hide the unhappiness beneath. "Catherine," Emily began, stirring her coffee nervously, "I need to tell you something. For years I judged you. We all did. The women in our circle, we talked about how foolish you were, throwing away everything for some fling with the help. But watching you now, seeing how happy you are, I realize we were wrong. You were the brave one. You had the courage to walk away from a life that was killing your soul." Emily's eyes filled with tears. I'm in the same position you were in 10 years ago. My husband treats me like a possession, not a partner. I'm lonely and empty and so tired of pretending, but I'm terrified to leave." Catherine reached across the table and took Emily's hand. "I know that fear," she said gently. "Leaving felt like jumping off a cliff. I had no idea if I would land safely or crash. But Emily, staying in a situation that's destroying you isn't really safety. It's just a slower kind of dying." Catherine spent the next hour sharing her story honestly, not glossing over the difficulties but also talking about the profound joy she had found in building a real life with Elijah. By the time they parted, Emily had tears streaming down her face, but there was also hope in her eyes, the first flicker of possibility that maybe she too could choose herself. That encounter stayed with Catherine for days afterward. She realized that her story had become bigger than just her own journey. It had become a testament to the power of choosing authenticity over appearance, love over security, courage over conformity. She thought about all the women trapped in gilded cages, just as she had been, and wondered how many of them would find the strength to fly. The answer, she knew, was that not everyone would. Some people would choose the security of their cages over the risk of freedom. And that was okay. That was their choice to make. But for those who dared to choose differently, Catherine wanted them to know that it was possible to survive the fall, to build something beautiful from the ashes of their old life, to find genuine happiness, even when it looked nothing like what they had been taught to want. One Saturday afternoon, Elijah and Catherine took their children to the park where he had proposed all those years ago. They watched as Hope pushed the twins on the swings, their laughter carrying across the playground. "This is legacy," Elijah said quietly, squeezing Catherine's hand. "Not money or status or social position. These children who know they're loved, who see us treating each other with respect and affection, who understand that real success is measured in connections rather than possessions." Catherine nodded, feeling the truth of his words deep in her bones. They had given their children something far more valuable than what Richard could have provided. They had given them a model of what real love looked like, of what it meant to choose your own path even when it was difficult, of how to value authenticity over appearance. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Catherine leaned against Elijah, feeling his solid strength beside her. "Thank you," she whispered. "For seeing me when I was invisible, for loving me when I couldn't love myself, for giving me the courage to choose my own happiness." Elijah kissed the top of her head, his arms tightening around her. "Thank you for being brave enough to take the leap," he replied. "For trusting me, for building this life with me, for showing me what it means to be truly loved." They stood like that for a long moment, their children playing in front of them, their past behind them, their future stretching out with endless possibility. In the distance, Catherine saw a woman sitting alone on a bench, her designer clothes and expensive jewelry marking her as part of the world Catherine had left behind. The woman was beautiful and perfectly put together, but there was a loneliness in her posture that Catherine recognized from her own past. She thought about going over, about sharing her story, about offering hope to this stranger who might be trapped in her own gilded cage. But then Hope called out, asking them to watch her go down the slide, and Catherine turned her attention to her daughter, to this life she had built, to this happiness she had earned through courage and sacrifice, and the willingness to risk everything for something real. The woman on the bench would have to find her own path, just as Catherine had. All anyone could do was bear witness to the possibility of transformation, of choosing differently, of building a life that was genuinely and authentically yours.